Written on the pages of the great book of nature lies a truth so profound that it has beckoned men and women throughout the ages to seek its wisdom. We will continue this quest and study many stories of humanity as we search for this light. On this journey, we will examine philosophy, religion, and science to uncover the hidden mysteries behind myth and legend using the symbols of universal Freemasonry. Welcome to Legends of the Craft.
Welcome back to Legends of the Craft. I'm here with my co-host, Brother Axel Savari, and today's question is that of atheism. Can you be an atheist and become a Freemason? And why are we discussing this? Because there's a long history of myths and legends and conspiracy theories that tie back to the root of Masonry and whether one can be an atheist, whether one cannot be an atheist. Both sides kind of arguing different things on this subject. So we're going to explore the history of this and the philosophical ramifications of allowing or disallowing atheists into a Masonic lodge.
Well, it's a very interesting question because, like we were discussing before the podcast, that if somebody that's not a Mason knows anything about Masonry, probably what they know is that they require some kind of a belief in God, and that's one of the requirements for joining the fraternity. But people might not be aware that one of the longest debates in Masonry itself is actually over this question: what it means to have a belief in God, if Masonry is affiliated with a particular religion, if an atheist or somebody that doesn't believe in a religious view of God or a supreme being can actually even become a Mason, whether it's peculiar to a single religion or if it can accept all religions. This debate's been going on for almost about 3 centuries now.
Well, and beyond that, depending on your frame of reference here, and I'm talking about conspiracy theorists or extremely religious people, they think that Masons are all atheists because they're devil worshippers, which they see as the same thing. So it really, the frame of reference here is pretty important. I think the common person off the street probably has heard something about the requirement of supreme being. If you watch too much YouTube videos on Freemasonry,
the requirement of a belief in Lucifer.
Exactly, which is essentially atheism because of the rejection of the Judeo-Christian God. So, I think this argument, this debate, we kind of need to go back to 1717 at least, because that's the formation of the Grand Lodge, and we have a gentleman named Anderson, John Anderson, who writes up the first constitutions of Freemasonry. And he writes something very interesting here that kind of frames this argument, and it will be this point that is argued by Masonic scholars for the next 300 years.
So this is a quote from Anderson's Constitution. It's probably one of the first and one of the most important Masonic documents. And it goes, quote, "A Mason is obliged by his tenure to obey the moral law, and if he rightly understands the art, he will never be a stupid atheist or an irreligious libertine. But though in ancient times Masons were charged in every country to be of the religion of that country or nation, whatever it was, yet it is now thought more expedient only to oblige them to that religion in which all men agree, leaving their particular opinions to themselves, that is, to be good men and true, or men of honor and honesty, by whatever denomination or persuasion they may be distinguished, whereby Masonry becomes the center of union and the means of conciliating true friendship among persons that must have remained at a perpetual distance."
This is a great paragraph you just read here. I think it outlines a couple things for us to discuss here today in defining the regulations of who can become a Mason. I think the first one let's talk about is a stupid atheist. It's kind of a funny way of putting it, right? A stupid atheist. And so it's implying that if you're an atheist, you're stupid. So what is really an atheist? And I think we need to get into the meaning of this word. It's a Greek word, right? It's atheist, which is, no
without
God.
God.
Without God.
Yeah.
Which is the opposite of being a theist, which is a belief in, a supreme being. So, basically these are the two big camps, atheist and theist. And then the third camp I want to throw in there is the agnostics, because I think there's a place for them, those people that essentially say, well, I don't know. I don't have evidence one way or the other, therefore I don't know, and I leave the possibility of both being true. So you have right, left, and center.
Well, it's interesting. I think that the Masonic case against atheism, that was kind of like that's being put forward here by Anderson, is really the same argument that was being had with the origins of atheism itself. So, it, like you said, it comes from ancient Greece, and the atheos, or the people without the gods, kind of stemmed from the argument in Greece as to whether or not morality could be derived from natural law, or that natural law and morality could only be derived from a belief in the gods. So there were these two camps, and the atheists in Greece were definitely in the minority, but there were people in ancient Greece who said that natural law was not a result of the gods, that the moral laws by which their society was organized could be derived from reasoning things out and weren't necessarily handed down by the gods. The majority of the philosophers of ancient Greece argued against this idea, but there were some notable ancient Greek atheists, and that's where the term comes from, is this old kind of argument as to whether or not morality requires something beyond human consciousness. And I think that's what he's talking about, that like all Masons are obligated to obey the moral law.
The argument's kind of silly because they kind of overlap one another. I mean, the question is, what is a god? You know, when we say God, are we saying that it's a man on a throne like Zeus, you know, throwing down lightning bolts and sleeping with the daughters of man, or is God a more philosophical concept which transcends sort of these sort of anthropomorphic ideas? And in that sense, natural law and the concept of God become more the same thing. Mm-hmm. So I think some of these arguments can get a little silly. They're almost a little semantical in nature. You know, to me, when we're talking about God, we're talking about a concept. And that concept, you can materialize that concept as a person or, you know, a being or some sort of entity. But a God can just be the laws of nature, can it? I mean, you know, there's this all-pervading sort of consciousness in the universe that regulates the laws of physics and chemistry and biology and all natural law. Isn't that itself a god?
Oh, absolutely. And I don't think that viewpoint was necessarily missing from the Greek religious discussion at the time. Like, we often think of our ancestors as, like, you know, believing all these, like, basically like comic book characters that ruled over their life and controlled the weather. And while I think, you know, there have always been literalists in every age, I think that's kind of the straw man of like militant atheism, is to be like, well, these people just believed in these superhuman characters that lived up in the clouds, and that was their only conception of religion. But I think, like, you know, we can, as from reading ancient Greek philosophy, we can tell that their thought process was pretty deep and pretty involved and capable of like the same kind of analysis that we can make now, which is that like these represent elements of the human psyche. Because if you look at the stories of the old gods, they're very human in their attributes. They do human things. It's almost like they're describing like ways of being in the world, and that they're like personifications of these concepts that you're talking about. So I think the debate has always been more subtle than it's been made out to be in the modern day.
Well, I think the stories are there for a reason. You know, I think humanity has been evolving over thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, millions of years, right? And in that, you know, our ability to read and write and to comprehend abstract ideas have also evolved. So I think in the ancient world, you have stories of these gods almost acting like human beings to some degree, but having greater powers. But those are stories, and I think those stories were meant to teach people a moral lesson. Same thing with Christianity, or at least the Judeo-Christian tradition. The Old Testament, God is very much like a God that you would see in Rome or Greece or Egypt. But the New Testament, God becomes extremely abstract. You know, God is love, as John says. So I think in this regard, as we evolve, the concept of God is evolving. You know, at one point in the ancient past, God were monolithic, you know, formations. They were stones. At one point, they were the stars. And, you know, now our concept of God is more philosophical. So I think as we evolve, God evolves. To me, this is very important. Like, God isn't sort of a fixed point. As the more we uncover, the grander God becomes.
Well, and I think this is what he's referring to by a stupid atheist, is that the idea that, like, when one contemplates natural philosophy in this way, like, you can't come to any other conclusion that there is this force that's evolving alongside human beings. That, like, the absence, like, that one cannot be present without the other, and that by denying one, you're denying the other. So like the evolution of human morality, and again, remember, this is written in 1717, when the when the consequences of human morality were a little bit more like present. People, especially in England, they had, I think, maybe 80 years before they'd fought the English Civil War. Like they've been fighting in France for 300 years. Like the concept of immorality and, humans committing violence and atrocity towards one another was a little bit more present in their minds. So the necessity for morality was also a little bit more pressing than I think it is for us today in the way that we've kind of structured society. So I think this debate was much more relevant to the society at that time than it may be now. Although I would argue that
I don't know. It's different now.
Sure.
But in some ways, it's more extreme. But I think you make a really good point. What we call today a hard atheist and soft atheist. There's different terms for these, but there's essentially like two types of atheists. The soft atheist is the person that sort of just rejects the religious dogmas of the Christian church or the Jewish or Islamic faiths, where they don't believe in this sort of anthropomorphic God. Mm-hmm. It's not that they
or the dogmatic structure that goes with it.
Yeah, but they're not really rejecting the idea that there's something higher. They're just rejecting the perspectives of organized religion. Hard atheists are those people that literally there is no God, there's nothing higher than us. Like
it's stupid to even think that.
Yeah, the universe is a cold place, just with particles interacting in random sort of mathematical ways, and that's just what it is, and we can kind of figure out how things work. But there really is no soul or essence or anything transcendent to the entire universe. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's when we go back to this term stupid atheist, I think this is 300 years old, but they're basically saying hard atheists, not soft atheists. Because, to be honest, I'm a Freemason, and I can consider myself a soft atheist. I mean, in many ways, I have, I wasn't brought up in religion, but if I had to take any of these religions literally, I would reject all those notions immediately. Mm-hmm. I do not believe in the literal interpretation of what God is in any of these religions. So in that sense, I could call myself an atheist, but I am in no way a hard atheist. Mm-hmm. Rejecting the idea of something higher than myself, higher levels of consciousness, higher levels of organization in the universe, in the cosmos. So I think Anderson here is, in a very direct way, is kind of separating out stupid and non-stupid atheists, right?
Well, and I think the second part of that phrase really speaks to what you're saying, the irreligious libertine. Because I think that's some 18th century language for what we would now call like a scientific materialist. It's another way of saying like a hedonist, or somebody that kind of believes in nothing beyond like personal pleasure or happiness. And I think that he makes a good point, and I would agree with him in the sense that thinking is incompatible with Masonry. I think that to reject any kind of transcendence in the universe, or to promote the idea that the universe is a place empty of soul or intelligence that exists outside of human beings, doesn't fit with Masonry. Not in the sense that like you're a bad person for thinking that, but in the sense that like what Masonry does, what it contemplates, and why it performs its rituals is incompatible with the idea that we're just shouting into the void.
Well, I mean, libertine is to pick somebody in history is like the Marquis de Sade. It's the perfect example of this word. It's just somebody they just want to feel good and they don't really care about anything else. And, there's these characters throughout history that they're just indulging in the physical pleasures and believe that that's really all that exists. I mean, like you said, it's hedonism, but it's an extreme form of hedonism. It's a modern form of hedonism. Which is this disconnection from anything transcendent. And if Masonry is saying you have to believe in something higher, so you can't be a stupid atheist, and you have to follow the moral law, Masonry is setting some boundaries up, but in a very loose way. Mm-hmm. There's two outer extremes here: the libertine and the stupid atheist, and in both of those are like landmarks.
Yeah,
like you go outside of that.
It's not this anymore.
It's not this. It's not Masonry anymore. And I think with the libertine subject, it implies objectivity. It's defining that there is objective morality, right?
Yeah.
Masonry isn't telling you what objective morality is. but it's saying it does exist.
It insists on its existence.
Yeah, and we need to try to find it and uncover. And I think there's always this argument between people that are very subjective or relative in their views of the universe or objective. It's like both exist. Okay, both exist. Like, yes, there is objective reality. I mean, if you believe in science, you believe that there's objective existence. There are real objects out there that we're sensing through our five senses. But at the end of the day, we're subjective creatures living in an objective universe. So none of us are going to get it perfect. But it does exist. So I think if you reject the idea of objective reality, then what's the purpose? And yes, if you believe there's no objective reality, then of course there can't be God. Of course there can't be anything higher. There can't be higher levels of consciousness, because really logic shouldn't even exist, or mathematics, because if the universe is purely subjective, then there can be no facts.
Well, then in that case, like, what do you think the opposite end of the opposite extreme of that same scale is? Like an over obsession with like objectivity that denies the subjective experience, because I feel like that's also a way to fall into a kind of like denial of a transcendent force, is to be like, well, there is only the objective, and the subjective perspective of human beings is always flawed and can never correctly perceive the universe. Therefore, all ideas of God or transcendent experience are subjective, like hallucination. That's like the hard materialist viewpoint.
Well, I mean, it's fascism. This is objective reality. There's no arguing it. It's just a fact. Nobody can have an interpretation of anything. That's a tyrant. That's just somebody saying, well, what I believe is the truth for everyone else. So, freedom is critical of objectivity exists, because since we're subjective creatures having an objective experience, then we have to have the freedom to come to our own conclusions of what's going on so that we can get closer to the truth. But as soon as you start mandating or forcing definitions down people's throats, well, then you're basically spitting in the face of objectivity.
There's another point in this paragraph from Anderson's Constitutions here that I thought was interesting. If you would scroll down a little bit.
Right there.
Yeah. So the part where he says, but though in ancient times Masons were charged in every country to be of the religion of that country or nation, whatever it was. So I think this is kind of the point, to address a different concern about Masonry and religion and atheism, is that this is where the conspiracy theorists latch on and be like, oh, they don't actually believe in anything. They'll just do whatever is expedient to blend in whatever country they find themselves, because their true goal is subversion, or they're truly atheists, so they'll just pretend to be religious. But the next line is, of course, that it's only to oblige them to that religion in which all men agree, leaving their particular opinions to themselves. Basically, the idea that I think it was Mackey that wrote that there's a like that God is equally present in the pious Hindu temple as he is in the synagogue or the Muslim mosque or the Christian church, and that kind of conception of God is what Masons kind of belong to, which becomes a much more fluid thing.
I think as Masons, what we try to do is, those are things people argue about. I'll take a Christian argument, baptism. So you fully be immersed in water, or, can you put some droplets on the child's forehead, or what age you can be baptized? Do you have to be younger? Can you be a little older? Those type of things. Like, those are the arguments that a Mason doesn't get into. It's like, these are particulars. And, every person will have their own flavor of religion and believe one thing's right over another. But those don't actually define our religious experiences in life. What we all agree on is that, that there is something higher than us, that there are some transcendent truths, that we can become better people, that we can grow, that we can establish levels of solidarity with our fellow human beings. These are concepts that just about everybody's going to agree with. It's kind of like, you're not going to find a society where it's not illegal to murder people. Generally in law, like, every society is going to agree, like, hey, don't kill people.
Don't take their stuff.
Don't take their stuff, and those type of things. Like, so I think, in a religious sense, that's what we're trying to do is, what is it that everybody agrees on? Because there's actually more that we agree on than we disagree. But I think the media and politics and power players try to get us all to focus on those little particulars. At the end of the day, aren't that important.
So I wonder then, because now that I think about it, I want, like, without a conception of, some kind of transcendent reality or principle in the universe, like, can you really, how do you rationalize a seeking of something higher than where you are without something transcendent in relation to where you are? Like, is it really, like, if you deny the existence of anything transcendent in life and you are a hard materialist, like, how do you seek to go beyond the material? Like, how could that possibly be compatible with something like Freemasonry, which does encourage, contemplation beyond the material? If that doesn't exist, then how can those two things be related to one another or exist in tandem?
Well, I think they don't. Right? If you're a staunch materialist, then morality is subjective. And if it's subjective, then why not kill people? Why not steal from people? Now, I know a lot of atheists, and they'll tell me like, "Oh no, as atheists, you don't need religion to be moral.
Good without God."
And I don't disagree that. Yeah, I know atheists, and they're great people. Like, I don't think they're terrible. But where did their morality come from? Well, I think this is an argument one of our friends made the other day. Atheists are using borrowed ethics, like they're taking from Christianity and from all these world religions, and they're taking out the so-called superstition and the stories and all that. But at the end of the day, they're using the philosophical workings of religion for thousands of years as the backbone of their morality. So yes, you can be an atheist and be moral, but where are those morals coming from? They're coming from religion.
Well, and because religion, I think, has it has had plenty of time to do this, but it's identified some universal particulars of the human experience that can't be denied, whether or not you believe that there is or isn't a God or a force that's similar to a God in the universe. Is that it has uncovered some universal principles or ethics in the universe. Principally, don't kill people or take their stuff. Like you said, that's at the bedrock of pretty much every civilization, is that it's better to leave your neighbor alive and with his possessions than it is to not, right? To have somebody to cooperate with. And I wonder where I'm going with any of this.
Well, I don't know where you're going with it, but I what you made me think of when you're saying that is, I think an argument for God. And again, I'm not Christian or Muslim or any of these things. So I'm not arguing for any religion, but it's just the concept of something higher, which I think is what you're getting at. It's like, there's no such thing as spontaneous generation. In science, nothing comes out of nothing. Like that's never been observed. That's never been seen. That doesn't exist. Everything is preceded by an effect or cause, right? So, just like a child is born of parents, and we can take that backwards in time, everything is created by something else. So when we talk about the creator, between quotes, the atheist doesn't like this, but it's like, again, take out the personality. I think that's what they don't like.
The anthropomorphization.
Yeah, they don't like what religion has done with it. But at the end of it, like, where'd the universe come from? Well, it's the Big Bang. Well, what caused the Big Bang? We can keep asking this question,
ad infinitum.
Yes, thank you. But at the end of the day, there's always something else that created something else, right? So we can't help but to then try to go back through time and space to trace back, the creator of a creator of a creator of a creator. So this is a process that we're uncovering, and that's why I think our concept of God evolves, because we're always finding the next step, like, oh, we found the Big Bang, and now those are the multiverse, and we're going to keep going. I don't think there's an end to it, but there's always something that created something else. Unless somebody wants to point out to me that spontaneous generation exists, but I have never found any evidence of it, and I haven't heard a single scientist say that it exists. It was actually disproven centuries ago.
Well, except for the Big Bang. It's give me this one moment of unexplainable magic, and I will explain material unfoldment from there. But before the first cause, like, there is nothing. And then there is something.
Well, now we know there's something probably before the Big Bang. But it's interesting because the Big Bang was discovered by a Jesuit priest in the Catholic Church, and the Pope, I forgot the name of the Pope, but the Pope that heard this discovery from this Jesuit priest said, "Excellent. We have proven God." And the Jesuit priest said, "Well, I could be wrong. I mean, we have to figure out if my math is right and everything." But it's interesting that the Big Bang, one of the biggest scientific theories, was discovered by a Catholic, and not only a Catholic, but a Jesuit Catholic, and that the Pope wanted to use this as evidence of the Creator. Isn't that
the
interesting?
Scientific evidence of God. Yeah. So, all that being said, given that we've kind of just solved the atheist question of the past 2 millennia, can an atheist be a Freemason? Can somebody that identifies as a modern atheist, and I think we've laid out a good definition of what we mean by that, can a modern atheist become a modern Freemason?
Yes. I mean, I think it depends on what type of atheist they are. Again, are they soft? Are they hard? Are they extreme? I think every person we have to look at on an individual basis, right? And it's no different. Like, well, if somebody was like an extreme evangelical Christian and wants to join the lodge, I would not think that's a good idea, actually, because they're coming in professing objective reality. They're not there to learn from one another. They're there to preach the good word. So
the word of Christ,
I think just as an extreme evangelical shouldn't be allowed, so should an extreme atheist not be allowed. But a soft atheist, like a soft theist, no, I think we meet on the center. So I don't actually think that bars you. It depends on the person exactly what they believe.
I agree, and I think there's a very particular and specific personality trait that bars one from becoming a Freemason, and that's the trait of not having any open questions in your life. Like if you have solved every problem and you're just ready to educate, then I don't think you're ready for Masonry. I think Masonry, the real requirement of Masonry is that there remains at least one open question in one's soul. Like the idea that there is something in the universe that is still unresolved for you. Because if that's not present, well then what need do you really have for Masonry? Like Masonry is an organization that is attempting, at least in whatever way is truly possible, to try to answer these questions. And again, that's why it's like there's no real like moral stricture to Freemasonry. There's no like this is what you believe if you are a Freemason. Again, there are landmarks that kind of put you in a geographical vicinity, but there's no specific like these are the tenets and dogma of Freemasonry. Like there are rituals that are specific and that don't change.
There's virtue, like like in our last podcast, we talked about temperance and fortitude and what are the other two?
Temperance, fortitude, justice, and prudence.
Yes, the four. I mean, it points us in a direction, but again, those are terms that we have to discover their meaning for ourselves. So I think Masonry points us to the mysterious. And I think that's what God really becomes, is an object of the mysterious. Like we know there's something we don't know, and God represents that mystery to be solved. It doesn't represent a guy on a throne with lightning bolts ready to sleep with the daughters of men, right?
Yeah. No, it's a moral perpetual motion machine. Like it's kind of like, to me, it's like, and I'm a huge sci-fi fan, so maybe that's why I have this analogy, but to me, Masonry is like it's like a moral spaceship that is just kind of propelling us forward infinitely through the moral cosmos of like trying to figure out what our position is, and built into it is a recognition that there really is no destination. And I feel like if you've solved all of the problems, like if for yourself, whether that's through hard militant atheism or strict evangelical religious belief, then you've kind of already arrived at wherever it was you're going, and you're not continuing to explore. I mean, human beings are explorers in a literal sense and in a metaphysical sense. Like, and if you're not moving in that direction, then it's not that Masonry has no need for you, but you don't have any need for Masonry.
Well, it's kind of like, I hate to put it this way, but it's like, if you're extreme religious person or extreme atheist, frankly, I don't think there's any difference. The two, they're the same personalities. I think they have mental illness, actually. Like they are so convinced of their truth that they have to convert everybody if they could, by force to their ideas. And I think that's a mental illness. I think human beings are people that seek the unknown. Think of a 3-year-old child asking why. They just want to know the universe. And those people that already know the universe and don't ask why, there's something wrong with them. Their brains don't work that well. And I think those extremes must be avoided. Otherwise, it will destroy the equilibrium of Freemasonry.
So, all of this being said, I wonder then how you would respond, Brother Matthias, to the, I guess it would be the accusation of the modern atheists. Like, if we're such a open-minded and liberal organization, the Freemasons, how is it that we would deny somebody entrance on the basis of their religious beliefs? Particularly in the case of extreme atheism. I don't know if you really find that argument from a religious person because they're not looking to join Masonry.
Do you mean
in the sense that Masonry is this kind of philosophically liberal organization that welcomes free thought? Like, how is it that we would deny a person membership on a philosophical basis?
I think it's a bit of criteria. Each lodge has to vote whether to accept people. So we don't have a rule that says we don't accept atheists. I think that's the key. At least our organization, Universal Co-Masonry, there is no rule saying if they say they're an atheist, they can't join. It's a case-by-case basis. Everybody has to be interviewed. Everybody has to meet with members of the lodge, and they have to find some sort of affinity for Masonic ideals, right? Mm-hmm. So I think we don't reject those people. Mm-hmm. We're looking for free thinkers. That's exactly what we're looking for. But the people that I call them evangelical atheists, they're not free thinkers. They already got it all figured out. Mm-hmm. So if they're not free thinking, why should they come into our free thinking society?
Exactly. And I think, too, that, we have to make a distinction between our organization and Masonry at large, because I think we are a unique case in the sense that, I've heard it said from our members and our leaders that, nobody's ever really rejected from Masonry in the sense that, you can never join. It's just a question of, can you join right now? Are you ready right now? And I think as an organization with professed philosophical beliefs, it is okay to say, yeah, you're not ready to become a part of this just yet. But it's not that you'll never be. It's up to you.
You might remember I did a Masonic Philosophical Society presentation in Chicago.
I remember that very clearly.
On Jung's synchronicities. And what was that guy's name that showed up?
I don't remember his last name, but I remember it was Tim from Bash, the Barrington area. Shout out to the Barrington area secular humanists.
And this guy came with an agenda. He wasn't there to listen to the presentation, to ask questions. He was there to educate us on why all these ideas of the supernatural, synchronicities, and all these abstractions are just stupid, and that only new atheism can bring us happiness and peace.
Which, and if I remember rightly, I don't think anything of what you were saying was really incompatible with what he believed. You could very easily make the interpretation that those were natural laws that you were talking about that just haven't been comprehended yet.
The new atheist is trying to preach the good word of the scientific method, which I love the scientific method. And I don't think science and religion are opposed to one another. Mm-hmm. But some of these new atheists, they're there to educate us because we're just stupid children lingering in superstition and darkness, right? Yeah. And I don't like that. I don't like people approaching one another with that type of mentality. Share your ideas with me. Mm-hmm. If you don't think there's a God, I'm willing to listen to it. And I think any Freemason should be able to explore these concepts without being offended or thinking they're heretical or dangerous.
Or that they're under attack.
Yeah, no. But, what was his name again?
Tim
from Bashford. I'll never forget it. It was very elucidating how he was so convinced it was true. And it reminded me of people I've met in the past that were evangelical Christians that, they basically would say to me, if you find one error in the Bible, Matthias, then the Bible isn't true. I'm like, wow, you're screwed. But if you point out those errors to them, they have a justification for everything.
Of course. Yeah. I think one of the other things that I think is kind of coming out of the new atheist movement, and perhaps they wouldn't associate this with themselves, but I certainly do. And I think it is a product of this kind of this Bash style of atheism that we're talking about, is that there's emerged, at least from what I've seen, a kind of cultural nihilism that accompanies this atheism. Is everything is stupid. Science has already figured everything out. Believing in anything supernatural is childish. The universe is empty, and there's no inherent meaning to anything. And any organization that seeks after inherent meaning or objective good or objective morality is engaged not only in a childish delusion, but in a delusional force, or not a delusional, but a destructive force for humanity. I think one of the things that's so kind of like abrasive of the kind of bashing style of atheism is that like, not only are your beliefs stupid, but belief is dangerous to human beings. Like believing in anything but objective materialism leads to danger and destruction, and we should avoid it all at all costs and not even contemplate these questions anymore.
I think that's why we have to separate, sort of atheism from new atheism, because this new push here is exactly what you're saying. It's this concept that it's fine being an atheist, but really the new atheist has to go out and convince all these stupid people that they're wrong. So that's why I call them evangelical atheists, because now they got to go out and tell everybody how they're wrong, just like evangelical Christians go around telling everybody they're wrong. So really, these are the same people. These are the same people. Two different religions. New atheism is a religion, right? I don't think it's anything but. And it's funny because you know what they're trying to do? They're trying to form communities where they have kids. Like,
Atheism Plus?
Yeah, like Sunday school, but it's for atheists.
Yeah.
They're trying to mimic the structure of church because they recognize, and I've had discussions with new atheists, that what's lacking is the sense of community. A sense of getting together.
That.
Yeah, and religion just has like a corner on this market, so they say. But it's interesting that they're basically trying to create, like, they're literally like, kind of like, I wouldn't call them churches, but they're like these places that you go to every week with your family and you hear the good word of atheism. And it's like going to school and having Sunday class and, maybe even singing some songs like you would at an evangelical church. Very, very interesting.
Well, I think that you're kind of like, that's kind of the point I'm trying to make here is that, like, I understand where they're coming from in the sense that, like, when you discover something that you think to be the truth of the universe, like, I get that you're excited about it, but destroying the moral underpinnings of society to promote it is really, like, I think kind of dangerous. And even on a small scale, it creates a void that humanity, like, naturally has to fill. So, like, you get rid of, like, all these churches and dogmas and things that you think are so dangerous to human society. But then you immediately start creating the very same structures that you just work so hard to destroy. And I think that there's a kind of, like, a unpondered or an unthought out kind of ramification to this kind of thinking that, like, if we just pull the moral rug out from under humanity, we're going to find ourselves falling into a pretty deep hole. And I guess my question is that, like what happens to a society if you completely destroy dogma? Like, I understand there are some bad things about dogma, but when we completely destroy those structures and don't replace them with anything, what happens to us?
Well, first of all, I don't think the new atheists are trying to get rid of dogma. It's just it's new dogma.
But they would say that they were.
Of course, because dogma is attached to religious institutions and their ideas. But dogmas, you can have scientific dogmas, you can have philosophical dogmas. I think at the end, this is a real interesting question, Brother Axel, because this idea that we can rid the world of dogma is a fallacy. There will always be dogma. These dogmas are beliefs that people that hold. And we as individuals must have beliefs. We will always have beliefs. Even if you believe in mathematics and you believe in reason and you believe in science and you believe in the scientific method, these are beliefs. You could say that they're better beliefs than religious beliefs or vice versa, but they're all beliefs. I think what Freemasonry is trying to get to when it says it's adogmatic, like our organization, is that we are trying to create an environment where you can pick your dogmas. A child will be indoctrinated by their parents. A church indoctrinates its members. Political parties indoctrinate their members. A society, a country, indoctrinates its citizens. But at the end of the day, I think Freemasonry is trying to say, look, you've been indoctrinated. You need to realize that. Go find what you like or what resonates with you and accept those as your dogmas. And be ready to discard those dogmas when you find better dogmas. But at any given moment, you're filled with dogmas, and your words, your justifications, your actions are all based on the dogmas The question is, were you programmed by somebody else, or were you able to reprogram yourself?
Well, and I think that, it said that masonry is a building craft. And so, like, what are we building? 'Cause we're not erecting awesome Gothic cathedrals anymore. So what is it that we're working with? I think the beliefs and the dogmas are the bricks that we're building up the society with. Like, I think in masonry, there's a kind of built-in recognition of the necessity of dogma to the functioning of civilization. Like, we have to believe in certain things in order to make society work. Like, we all have to kind of have some general basis of belief, or this doesn't work. And discarding everything without an attempt to, like, really start over, like, that doesn't work. And throwing away all of tradition, that doesn't work either. We're building a transgenerational kind of thing here. It's a big project, and to just rip out the foundation stones from underneath us isn't really progress. But I agree. Like, we should always be casting new bricks. Like, we're always making new stones. But the necessity of stones for a building is something that I don't think we necessarily need to question. Like, we do need building materials. We should be always looking to refine those materials to make them stronger and more long-lasting. But the idea that we don't need materials upon which to base our beliefs is kind of, I think, more dangerous than, religious fanaticism. At least they have belief.
Now, you're just picking one side there, Brother Axel.
That's true.
I think fundamentalism on the other side is equally as dangerous. You might prefer one based on your own dogmas, but they're equally dangerous to creating a society of censorship and non-freedom. There's a quote here from Benjamin Franklin. This is great. He says, quote, "I do not know in what God I believe, or how he was formed, or does he exist. I only know that I believe in something." And I think that's really, like, that should be a motto for Freemasonry. Like, all I know is that there's something out there.
I believe in something.
I believe in mystery. I believe in the unknown. I believe I don't have all the answers. But I believe in that. Yeah. And that, I think, is a critical belief to, it's not just to Freemasons, to every human being. I mean, it's the mysterious that pushes us forward. Space travel, exploration of oceans, of the human body. Like, every realm of scientific pursuit, of philosophical pursuit, of religious pursuit is in being a traveler, of being an adventurer, of going into the unknown and trying to figure out more about who we are and about the universe. And so when Benjamin Franklin says, "I only know that I believe in something," it's beautiful. That's what it is. And that's the building blocks. We're the building blocks of what we figured out along this journey. And that's why Masons are travelers.
Yeah, I really like that point that, like, Masons are moving towards something. I mean, really, it's kind of it's the recognition that human beings are moving through space towards an end. And that Masons as travelers are kind of those that kind of realize the transit and are at least trying to pick a destination. Maybe they haven't found one, or it changes from time to time, but there is at least an effort towards that end to reach somewhere. Perhaps with the knowledge that you never really will, and that kind of the journey is the entire point, but at least that you're moving towards something.
In the Masonic world, I mean, there's basically two centers of Masonry. There's Anglo-Saxon Freemasonry that comes out of England, which is what American Freemasonry is. And you find this Masonry in India and Australia and Canada, basically wherever the
British Empire was.
I was about to say the Roman Empire, the British Empire, sorry. And then you have Continental Freemasonry, which basically comes out of France. And, to the uneducated Mason or person that's not a Mason, they're going to basically say this is religious Freemasonry from England and atheist Freemasonry from England, especially the Grand Orient of France. This goes back to an event that took place in 1877. So there was a Grand Assembly, and all the delegates of the leaders of the lodges gathered in the Grand Orient, and they made a vote, to lift the mandatory obligation to refer to the great architect of the universe in lodge rituals. Now, I've been in rituals in Paris under the Grand Orient of France. They didn't remove the term the great architect of the universe. I've heard this from English and American Freemasons. That is ignorance. They still talk about the great architect. They just don't have the emphasis on sort of the religious connection with that term to God. So you're not going to hear the term God really a lot. in the Grand Orient rituals, but they still have references to the great architect of the universe. So at this point, many of the Grand Lodges, the American Grand Lodges, the Grand Lodge of England, they cut off their recognition for the Grand Orient. And so the Grand Orient to this day is its own island of Freemasonry. It's huge. Mm-hmm. And there are Grand Orients of Belgium and Italy and so forth. But continental Freemasonry has been isolated from essentially a large part of the world, and this is because of this decision in 1877. But I want to make the point that they didn't say that you couldn't believe in God and be a Mason in France. Mm-hmm. They're just saying, we're not going to ask you. We're not going to make this mandatory that you believe in God. Mm-hmm. It kind of goes back to Anderson's Constitution, where they're going to say, well, we're going to leave those particular questions to each person, and we'll just agree on what we can agree on and not fight with these little things. And so in some ways, it's kind of a stretch back to Anderson's Constitution, to the original formation of the First Grand Lodge. And in many ways, I think that this wasn't a bad move. Now, I have a friend in the Grand Orient, and he says, well, you also don't tell people you believe in God because you'll get made fun of. And he's like, he started going back to church, and he said he saw another person in another pew nearby, which was another Mason. They kind of looked at each other, but they never brought it up because, if it got out that they were going to church all the time, there might be some discrimination in that opposite way. So the Grand Orient, I think, maybe has gone too far from that decision in 1877, but I don't think it was necessarily a bad decision.
No, and with any schism of belief, battle lines are inevitably drawn. And there become extremists on both sides, and then sides are taken, and there becomes a kind of an us against them mentality that's somewhat ingrained even within an organization like Freemasonry. But I mean, I would agree with the French decision here that it's the ultimate expression of liberty of thought to say we're going to make it part of the rules of the organization that we don't ask you, because that question in itself was much more contentious in 1877 than it is in 2020. Asking what somebody's religious affiliation was and whether or not they believed in God was a much bigger deal in the 19th century than it is in the 21st. I guess it still is in France, but I think that's more of an emergence of a culture that's taken place in a form of Masonry. And there was I guess an equal and opposite culture that emerged in British Masonry, which was, again, with the historical context of 1877, this is the Third Republic of France, which has become a very radical Republican, leaning, in the classical sense of the word, Republican-leaning form of government and culture, and in England at the time is still a very staunch Victorian monarchy. Mm-hmm. And they don't like all these ideas of free thought and the separation of church and state and the waning of ecclesiastical and monarchical power. So it was, again, because Freemasonry at the time tended to attract prominent members of society, and if that organization is promoting a political radicalism that you don't want to encourage, then you start to isolate those areas, and that form of Masonry kind of falls out of favor from the English, who were very much attached to their monarchy and their system of government, and didn't want that challenged by the kind of more radical political ideas that were emerging in France. So this was a kind of a perfect excuse to kind of make this artificial schism between them and be like, oh, well, they're a bunch of irreligious atheist libertines over there that just want to destroy the good order of society.
It is a great point, Brother Axel, because, human beings, whether Freemason or not, there's always these political agendas, right? Mm-hmm. And that was 1877 marked a wonderful spot. But, to our listeners out there, the Grand Orient of France is a wonderful organization. It's very different from American Freemasonry, even from Universal Co-Masonry or from the Grand Lodge of England. But it has its place in Masonry, and that's the beauty of Masonry. Why do we all have to be the same? Mm-hmm. Let there be differences. That's part of the freedom of Freemasonry. Mm-hmm. So we should at no time believe that they are not Masons or that they're clandestine. That's nonsense. They're not irregular or non-mainstream. They're huge. They're a massive organization in France, and they're doing good works.
The irony of American Masons calling continental Masons irregular, to see an American organization so fervently supporting the aims of the British Empire is kind of ironic to me, that you have all these staunchly American organizations that unwittingly are kind of echoing the political sentiments of the British Empire, even after the Revolution.
Here's a thought experiment that I just thought of. What if American Freemasonry had followed the steps of its French brethren, which would have been in concert with the Revolution? So what if American lodges were like continental lodges, which, by the way, also called liberal Freemasonry because it's more progressive and etc. Not liberal in the sense of American politics, but liberal in the sense of being progressive and opening its door to men and women, and having more discussion and debate on all sorts of scientific and political subjects. But again, back to the scenario: what if the 18th, 19th century, we had seen more French Masonry in America? I wonder if our republic of the United States of America would be a completely different country today.
Well, okay, so I have a theory, and I'm certainly no academic researcher, and this is not backed up by any hard scholarly research by any stretch of the imagination, but I have a theory that, and I'm certainly not the first person to make this connection, but that Freemasonry in England was used as a tool of the British Empire. That wherever the British Empire wanted to go, Freemasonry also went. Because and not as some kind of organized conspiracy, but by the fact that prominent civil servants and military officers were Masons. They were Freemasons from the United Grand Lodge of England. And as England kind of went out and conquered the world and established her colonies, these Masons were often in positions of leadership in these new colonies. And some of the first things that they would do is, whether it was a traveling lodge in the military or, in more established kind of city centers of these colonies, is they would establish Masonic lodges, and they would bring together the prominent members of whatever the society was that they were colonizing into the Masonic lodge to integrate them more quickly with British society. And I think the kind of attachment to American Masonry that was maintained by the English was, at least in part, a reaction to the Revolution and a expression of the desire to retain American society and culture within the umbrella of the British Empire, because America was a vast colony at the time that was becoming more prominent in the world, and to have that ideologically separated from England would have been a further blow than just to be militarily and geographically isolated from the British Empire. Basically that promoting British Freemasonry in America was a way to keep America ideologically connected with the ideas of the British aristocracy and the elite who rule British Freemasonry. Like the head of British Freemasonry is a member of the royal family. So that cultural connection did exist. And I wonder, to your point, that if there was a more continental influence after the Revolution, then it might have gone in a completely different direction.
I think absolutely. If you look at George Washington and right after you have John Adams and Thomas Jefferson as rivals, there's this idea that America should aid France in its revolution against, the monarchy. And so there's two forces in America right after the Revolution, because the French Revolution's within a decade after our Revolution. And it comes to be this argument, should we aid them as they aided us? Because anybody that doesn't think that, it was the French that secured our victory against the English doesn't know anything about American history. Without French support, we would have lost. And so people like Thomas Jefferson wanted to continue the revolution. These ideas of liberty, equality, fraternity should be expanded not only within America, but everywhere. And we should go back and help the French. And then there were these people oh, no, we're still, we may be Americans now, but we're still British, and we have to support that type of idealism in the world. And ultimately, that did win out. And I actually think that American Masonry, choosing the route of staying with the English style of Freemasonry, was a huge part of that, because Masonry was so important in the early days, and so many men were part of those lodges that it influenced their way of thinking and of governance, right?
Yeah.
So I think if we had gone the way of continental Freemasonry, I think our country would look very different than it does today.
Well, and I think this is an interesting place to bring up universal Co-Masonry, because the predecessor to Co-Masonry, Le Droit Humain, was formed under the Grand Orient of France. It comes from the lineage of continental Freemasonry. But it was at least the federation that eventually became the American Federation of Human Rights and now Universal Co-Masonry was definitely influenced by coming to America at the turn of the 20th century. So there's kind of like a mixing between the continental ideas, but then it is encountering the culture that was shaped by this close proximity to English Masonry. So when when Louis Wazoo arrives here in the very early 1900s and starts opening lodges, he's got these continental ideas. Him and Muzzarelli, they have these very continental ideas of Freemasonry, but they're encountering a fraternal body that's also heavily influenced by traditional kind of English Masonry, like the men and women that joined the very early American lodges of Le Droit Humain their parents and grandparents had been American Masons who were really English Masons, so that you kind of have this blending of cultures.
I agree with that, but a lot of the members of the American Federation of Human Rights at the turn of the 20th century were minors. They were actually they're all immigrants from Eastern Europe, from the mines of France, etc. And what you bring up is interesting because Universal Co-Masonry, we're a small organization. Many people profess to want the things that we do here. Many male craft Masons like, oh, you guys debate and you do this and you do that, and that's what we really want. But our organization isn't huge because liberal Freemasonry or continental Freemasonry, which we are a mix of both English and French Masonry, we're an amalgamation of both. But still, like, America in general is resistant to these European ideas. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Americans are still very British. They're very English, whether they want to admit it or not. And I think Le Droit Humain, Universal Co-Masonry, our difficulty in expanding quickly is a result of different mindsets.
That kind of old friction of the two ideas coming in contact with each other. Yeah.
And of atheism, because, our organization is far more open-minded. We allow all sorts of people to join, while American Freemasonry still remains sort of a bastion of Judeo-Christian ideas. Mm-hmm. And we have some of those Judeo-Christian ideas, but we have many other ideas. We have Eastern ideas, and we have indigenous people ideas, and all these different concepts is kind of a melting pot of ideas. And I think, I hate to make this such a general comment because I don't think everyone's like this, but I think in general America can be in some ways very close-minded when it comes to ideas. You look at politics, people talk about European ideas, and it's me like, oh, those are communist ideas, those are socialist ideas, and it's like, well, some of them are, and certainly some of them are not that way. But Americans can be very suspicious of other political systems, of different philosophies. They can be a little narrow-minded, and I think that's the result of that is a harder level of expansion for our type of organization.
I think our viewpoint can be nicely summed up in this anonymous...
you mean us, like Universal Co-Masonry?
Yes, Universal Co-Masonry. You found this great little apocryphal story here that I want to read. It goes, a witty Frenchman was asked once, do you believe in God? And his answer was, what do you mean by God? Nay, do not answer, for if you answer, you define God. A God defined is a God limited, and a limited God is no God. And listening to that story, I can understand the English frustration with the French conception of God. Having lived in England for 8 years and understanding the culture, I can understand why this would be a problem for English Masons.
Well, I think this perfectly defines Universal Co-Masonry. That's why we don't have any hard rules on whether we accept atheists or not. It goes, again, to each individual and exactly what do they believe. Are they seeking the highest? And in our Declaration of Principles, we say the following, that in accordance with the ancient Declaration of Freemasonry, the Supreme Council asserts the existence of an absolute and all-pervading creative principle under the title, the Great Architect of the Universe. This is very vague and does not pin down any sort of belief in one God or another or any concept or how you would describe this. It's just, we believe that there's something out there that's absolute and that it's creative, and therefore we can discern its understanding. Is it a he? Is it a she? Is it a what? Is it this or that? It doesn't really make a difference. It's just, again, you need to believe in something higher than yourself. And I think this leads into the motto of our organization, that we work to the glory of God and the perfecting of humanity. Not the perfection of humanity, like the French Masons, but the perfecting of humanity. What do you think this means? Because it can seem very religious, but I actually think it's not.
Well, I think it's quite it's very open, and not in the sense of like avoiding the question necessarily, but in the sense of like, to me, this statement encompasses all the aspirations of humanity. And maybe that sounds kind of ridiculous, but like, I think, to the glory of God and the perfecting of humanity, that is a one sentence summation of all of the work that human societies across the planet and at all times have been attempting in some way or another to do. And that Masonry is a distillation of the effort of civilization. And that's why it can be so easily installed in any country or belief system or religion around the world, not in a conspiratorial sense, but in the sense that it plugs into humanity. Mm-hmm. Because these are kind of the two aspects of humanity. The perfecting of humanity is the building up of technological society. It's the building up of architecture and the arts and all these kind of like terrestrial, earthly things, the sciences, things like that. Whereas the glory of God encompasses the religious aspirations of humanity. It's the building of monasteries, the developing of religious traditions, like these kind of two pathways of human life, to either kind of recluse yourself into the life of a monk or to, delve into humanity and contribute something. Like, these are really the two paths that human beings take in expressing themselves in a very distilled down kind of sense. Like, these to me are the twin aspirations of humanity, and Masonry is an attempt, in my opinion, to unite those two paths, to make them the same road.
I think that's the unique nature of universal Co-Masonry, because I agree with you 100%. The glory of God is the path of faith and religion, and the perfecting of humanity is the path of philosophy and science. And really, if you look at English Freemasonry, American Freemasonry, it's looking more to the glory of God. But if you look at continental Masonry or liberal Freemasonry in Europe, it is working to the perfecting of humanity or the perfection of humanity. And as universal Freemasonry, we're saying, no, you got to do both. There's a religious aspect to our lives and there's a scientific aspect. And they're not contrary to one another. They actually work together hand in hand. And so I think it's actually the statement, the glory of God and the perfecting of humanity, is both ends of that are exactly the same. There's just two different ways of saying the same thing, which is working towards something greater. Because glory is a word that means high renown or honor won by notable achievements. Right? And the perfecting of humanity is the process of perfecting. We actually don't believe in the utopian perfection. We believe that we're working just in the process of perfecting, of every day becoming stronger and better and greater, of solving our problems as a humanity. So universal Co-Masonry takes the middle path, combines the religious and the scientific, and believes only by doing both can we achieve the ultimate act of perfecting ourselves in the universe.
Thank you for listening to Legends of the Craft. This podcast is purely the opinion of brothers Matthias Comsier and Axel Suvari and does not represent the official views of Universal Co-Masonry. Universal Co-Masonry is a Masonic order founded on the principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity that admits men and women without distinction of race, religion, or creed. For more information, please visit universalfreemasonry.org.